Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of The X Button. I am one of your hosts, Alejandro. With me is the nostalgic
Paul. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
How you doing, Paul? We're here recording episode 53 earlier than usual because you're going on vacation.
If you're watching me right now, I'm either dead or I'm in Destin. One or the other.
Yeah. Destin, Florida. You always love going there, right?
Yeah,
it feels like that's
yearly thing for my family.
Is it really that cool of a place, or do you just have like a beach house or something?
Part of it is because that's where that or Fort Walton, which is just a little closer to us, is my parents had a condo there since they were got married, and then eventually that just kind of spiraled into this is going to be our yearly getaway from everything. So now that my brother and me are both married, it just becomes this big all right, we're going to rent out this big room in a condo that we own, and everyone's just going to hang out. We're going to go to the beach, we're going to chill, and obviously my wife, being an ex-swimmer for college and high school, is all about the water. And I've traveled pretty far, and I still think Destin has some of the best water.
I was gonna ask, isn't Louisiana have water close to it?
It has water. There is water here. It's just not the kind that you really want to get out there.
Okay.
It's very brackish, and I don't know, how close are you to the coast?
I am 45 minutes away to the nearest coast.
Would you say it's pretty blue out that way?
It's the Pacific, so
it's deeper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Lesser blue. Yeah.
If you can think of Cozumel and Cancun as that cerulean blue, this is more like an emerald green.
Ooh, okay.
Which is crisp. And so there's a space for all of it, but because of how close it is, and you can get that without leaving the country. Also, the whitest and softest sand I think I've ever been to.
Okay, that sand to me is the deal breaker.
Yeah.
Going to the beach. Yeah, where I used to have a beach house in a place called Costa del Sol, the sand was coarse, it was rough, and it got everywhere. So
Stop it. Stop it. But you know what? You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Because this is soft. It is so pulverized down. It is like a powder, and it's wonderful. So yeah, that's the main reason why we do that. So
yeah, and we've always said from behind the scenes, well, I think we've ever also mentioned it within the show that we've always wanted to do evergreen episodes to insert whenever it would happen, because
first time we were able to do one.
Yeah, because the two times that I could have inserted one, your absence was completely unpremeditated. You forgot to tell me about your vacation also to Destin, Florida, almost a year ago, and then our friend PJ jumped in and we did a non-traditional show where we just talked about the Nintendo Direct and his predictions, and since he's very into Nintendo, so I got to pick his brain a little bit. And then when you were in the natural disaster, what was the name of the hurricane? Ida. So it was that just happened. So it was oh yeah, it's not gonna happen. And then our friend Zach, who we had already kind of inserted in the I think it was 1 or 2 episodes before when we did the Gamescom.
Yeah.
That it was the three of us. We got him in as a dark and embodied voice.
That was really funny to watch.
Yeah, because he didn't have a camera, but we got him in that episode, so he got able to jump in to cover for you. But this is the idea for these episodes, and knowing ahead of time when you know that you're going to be in vacations, we can record a few. But we may have to record a few more, because this one, at least I knew it was on vacation. Imagine if you get sick one day. So it's always good to insert those. So
either that, or every year there's going to be a hurricane, at least one of them, that's going to stop me for a couple of days. So that one, we should have a couple just in case. But I'm glad we can make this one work.
Yeah. So as an evergreen, this is the X Button episode 53. The X Button is our gaming podcast that posts every Wednesday from 2 p.m. onwards, God willing, available in the YouTube channel Escape Media, as well as most audio services around the world, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. You can find links in the RSS feed at anchor.fm/escape-media. If you enjoy our show, give us a like and subscribe. Usually, Paul, today, this is the moment where I ask you, what have you been playing? However, we are recording after episode 51, basically. We already talked about what we've been playing, so we haven't miraculously played anything in the 30 minutes we took a break from doing this. And when it comes to news...
talking about? I beat Elden Ring.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, in lieu of the kind of like off schedule version of this episode, we're doing something we haven't done in a little bit. When we used to, we had it initially, then we didn't do it, then we tried to reinsert it a little bit, and then our shows were getting a little too blurred, and then we kind of took it out again. This is perfect to bring back topic and just kind of embellish an episode around. Yes. So this one is a topic that I had like floated to you back in June 2021 when we were just like, this is how long ago I told you about doing this kind of evergreen episodes there where you can go live at any moment. And the topic was let's talk about the favorite games of the consoles we owned. So usually there's like, these are our favorite games of all time, or the best games of all time, and I think there's a difference between something that is the best and then something that is kind of like your favorite. Yep. And kind of like the idea for this is that I know there are games from many of the consoles that I have that are better. It's just these are the specific games that when I think of that console, I think of this game. So how we're gonna do this is that we're gonna say what the consoles we've owned ourselves are, and then from there on we're just gonna talk about each game from each of these consoles that just reminds us of that console. So I have owned at least around 20 systems in my entire life, or at least my dad bought them and all that. So I want to hear yours first. What are the systems that you've owned? Yeah.
The systems themselves that I have owned, I'm going to start with the portable ones and then kind of go into the home consoles just because that's the way it's laid out. I first owned a Game Boy Color.
Yeah.
And I went on to the Game Boy Advance, the DS, 3DS. Of course, I accidentally hit a button. Into the PSP. And then, of course, we've got our PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, GameCube, Wii, 360, Xbox One, PS4, Switch, PC. I realized I didn't put anything for the PS5, but I feel like it's too early to kind of...
I did put one just for fun and rounding it up, so maybe you can think of one.
I'll think of one by the end of this, but that's what I've owned.
Yeah, so basically we have almost all similar with... Did you mention GameCube?
I did, yeah.
Okay, bye. Yeah, okay.
So famously, I'm going to be missing the original Game Boy. However, I do have one for that because Game Boy Color could play everything from it. I'm missing the original Xbox. I'm missing.
I have it.
The wait a minute, I'm blanking out on one.
You didn't have this. You didn't have
Go.
Yeah,
I'm missing.
But the PSP Go was basically a PSP, so that don't count.
That was the joke on that one. I don't have a Vita. So I did borrow a friend's of mine, but so like I technically had a favorite, but I've really only played 2 games from it, and I missed out on. No, I think I've got just about everything else.
You also didn't talk about the Nintendo 64 or the Super Nintendo. So
I missed out on all of the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and the N64 because those were all kind of before I got into it. / my parents didn't have money to buy game systems back at that time. Yeah. I have a favorite for the N64 really, but that was like exclusively played with friends. So
if you want to mention it, we can throw it in there if you want. So
yeah. Well, whenever you say, do you want to do like?
Yeah, we're gonna go in the order. We're gonna kind of like in the order of generations in a way. This basically starts with the Super Nintendo with me, and then when we have a system that we're overlapping, that's when you jump in.
Okay, so that's fine with me, and you can go first so that you have a more comprehensive.
Yeah. So listen to the ones that I have, so you to make sure that we're similar. So I did have the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, the PlayStation 1, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the PC, GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, Nintendo DS, PSP, Xbox 360, PS3, Wii, Nintendo 3DS, PS Vita, PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, PS5. So I think if you said it right, it's like you don't have Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 and PlayStation Vita, right? But everything. And do you have a Wii U?
I did not.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, so sorry, Wii U.
I unfortunately had to skip that, but my roommate at the time owned one, so anything that was like really big at that time, I could kind of borrow it from him. But for the most part, there wasn't really anything worth doing besides maybe like Pikmin 3 or whatever, which is now on the Switch, I think. But oddly enough, I never actually got around to buying that. I need to do that one.
I only played the demo, and that was enough for me. So it wasn't bad, but it was like I got my fill. So yeah, so then I'm gonna start us with all the way to the first Nintendo. This was the system that when I was already born, my dad already had it. So
wow,
it was a very special. That's the system that got me into gaming. And even though the first game I ever played for that is Super Mario World, a game that I consider very highly in some of my favorite games, like best games of all time. The game that I always remember, no matter what, like when I think about that system, and I got to replay it recently through the Nintendo Switch Online with my mom, and just beat it all in one sitting. And to me, so it's my favorite because it's so challenging and has probably some of my favorite gaming music of all time. Donkey Kong Country 2: Diddy Kong's Quest is my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time.
Really?
It is. It's just such a superlative 2D platformer. I just obviously it's like those games back in the Super Nintendo were so tough. I remember that it was like it just being able to play them now on the Nintendo Switch with the Switch Online and being able to kind of like reset. Like it allows you to kind of like rewind some mistakes that you have and being able to save at all times without having to rely on specific points where you can save. And being able to play it now is like it's still to this day one of the finest platformers ever made. I still stand by that, especially, but I feel it's also always enhanced by that music. The music of that game is such a 90s nostalgia for me that every time that I hear that music, I immediately go back to the first time I ever laid eyes on that game, the first time that I played through the it's also a pirate game. It's probably one of my favorite pirate themed games there because the music is very pirate-ish. The enemies are all decked in pirates, and there's just like a certain cuteness and sweetness to it that just hits me in the soul. So even though Super Mario World being the first game I ever played is why I consider it probably the best game I've ever played in a way, because it's what it started me. Diddy Kong is the one that I remember most from that system. Have you ever played Diddy Kong?
No. I famously have not played any Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong game.
Yeah, okay.
Any of them. So
if you have Switch Online, you can try it. That's the best thing. You have a Switch, you can at least give it a whirl.
That's true. I know. My wife famously played it a lot with her brother, so if there's ever an opportunity for me to get one of those, I think I will just for her, but then we'll get to play together whenever that happens.
I mean, do you have the Switch? If you have Switch Online, it's there. Just play it.
Like the whole game?
The whole game is there. Remember, Switch Online has the SNES and the NES collection. The SNES collection has Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3. I love all those 3 games. 2 is my favorite of all of those.
I might have to save that as a trump card whenever I can use it.
Yeah, no, literally use it, especially since your wife uses the Switch a lot.
Yeah,
I think that would be a great like nostalgia kick if she's played those.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find it and download it so that we can play that, because I know she would love it. I just never vibed as much with Donkey Kong and the storyline of all that. But
it's the music for me.
Never had an opportunity to.
Yeah,
really.
you should try it, especially now that it has the easy mode of rewinding if you mess up. You can always try it. It used to be harder, but
the only reason I enjoyed the Castlevania games when I was playing through those.
No, here's also what's funny about those Donkey Kong games, because my mom usually asks me if I could ever play competitively, like in a Call of Duty, like my brother does when he plays Warzone. I tell her I can't play that kind of game. However, if someone would ever do like a competition to see who finishes Donkey Kong first, my muscle memory for that kind of game is still till this day. As soon as I pick up the controller and start moving, I remember all the tricks, all the nuances of the platforming of those games. That's how much that Donkey Kong game means to me. So, yep, that's my favorite game from the Super Nintendo. And since you don't have one for the Super Nintendo,
for the Super Nintendo, if I had to, because I have played like Mega Man X.
Oh, you played it there?
So I would probably play, because I actually played on my friend's system, which is like original hardware, because his whole thing was about like speed running old games, and he'll just go through and play the entirety of Mega Man and stuff like that. So I was like, that would probably be one of them, or maybe one of the older Castlevania games, but I don't think I played any of the ones that were originally on the Super Nintendo, so I can't really count those. But yeah, if I had to guess, probably just Mega Man X, but I didn't play a lot of it, so that would
It reminds you of that, so
it does.
at least.
Especially like that and like Killer Instinct, because I remember he would blow that off, just like slam it.
Yeah.
And we would get to play that together, and he would of course like sweep the floor with me. I'm like, wow, this was crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, what you got next?
Killer Instinct. So now I move on to the Nintendo 64, a system that my dad bought when I was 3. I'll never forget getting the Nintendo 64 because I was with my mom and my sister at her room like 4 houses ago in 1996. And then suddenly my dad he comes in and he reads this new machine. He's like, I bought a new machine. I want to show you guys. And it was the N64. And with it, he brought what ended up being, still to this day, still my favorite game on that system. Super Mario 64. Yes, there's Ocarina of Time. Yes, there is Star Fox. Yes, there is Majora's Mask. Yes, there is Mario Kart. Yes, there is GoldenEye. The N64 has so many classics, despite that system being like the downfall of Nintendo in a way, as like the original PlayStation just kind of overtook it in like popularity and what being the system that people wanted. But the iconic games that system has, some of the best. But Super Mario 64 is the reason we have 3D games to begin with. It was the very first, and that game to me is like so iconic because I remember every single level from like all the time. Even when I played it back in the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection that came out on Switch, that's no longer there available, RIP Mario. The bomb levels, the floating island in the sky, the ocean, the snow level with the penguin, the fire level, the desert level, the amazing soundtrack. That's the thing. I feel like these early games really define to me what makes them so memorable, and a really good soundtrack will always like tickle the fancy of your nostalgia and will always be the thing that you remember most. And the Mario 64 soundtrack to me still to this day is still the best of any 3D Mario game. There's like the other ones have like iconic themes. The Delfino Island for Mario Sunshine is like, I didn't like it at first, but now it's like it
worms its way into your ears.
Exactly. And there's like over time it warmed up to me. And then the main majestic soundtrack of Galaxy is also another one that works. And then Odyssey, especially replaying that recently.
Yeah, you came around on that.
Yeah, I came around on that one a lot, showing it to my mom. So, but more importantly, especially fitting where I'm recording this, today in El Salvador is Mother's Day, and Mario 64 is always the big game that will always remind me of my mom, because that's the game that I share with her. That's the game that I will always play with her. Recently, I sped run through it, all 70 stars, and I'll always remember it because it's the only game when I finish I cry. Because of, yeah,
I remember like the end with how like much of a send-off / goodbye it was. It would mess people up, and I was just like, I missed out on all of that, which makes me so sad that like I didn't know about 64 until the DS version, and I played that with like all of the play as Luigi and Wario and all that stuff. But like, just goes to show how powerful games are, that they can elicit such a memory and emotion from us.
Still to this day. See?
I think I'm freezing.
Yeah, you're freezing a lot. Yeah. Yeah, but that's what's so funny about that game, because that song and then Goodbye, I don't know why it hits. Yeah. It's like such a lovely game that it's like saying goodbye to something that's such a warm memory. And more than ever, because obviously people say how life gets harder, more complicated. That game always remind me at a time where it was just happiness, and it's always a memory no matter where my mom is. I remember experiencing that with her, and I will always treasure Mario 64 that way. So.
I'm really glad that you were able to share that. Mine, I actually had, I'll tell a quick story. For mine, it was Mario Kart.
So multiplayer, basically.
Yeah, and it was really powerful because that was where I could play with my friends, and where a lot of people were like GoldenEye, I was more like a Perfect Dark kid. But I
can you believe Perfect Dark was also from N64?
I cannot half the time. It was ridiculous. gosh, that whole era of shooters. But what I wanted to actually talk about, there was an right after Katrina in 2005. We were like not sure about what was going on. We were still in like the PS2 era, and I didn't have any of my stuff, but this family took us in, and they were on like this small sort of plantation home with a few acres of land, and there was a bayou in the back, there was sugarcane left and right, and there was a single Nintendo 64 with Mario Party 3. And me and my brother would sit there and play it for hours, that one game in that old Nintendo 64, and it was such a place of calm and peace in the middle of everything else going around that we still look back on that time of like, oh, that was good. So whenever,
and you were in the middle of so much despair that was Katrina, like you like being in the, I can't imagine having to live through now twice that happened to you, living through two big disastrous storms for the city of New Orleans.
We've lived through a lot of them. They just don't get televised. There's at least like one every 2 or 3 years that knocks our electricity out for like a whole week or something. But most of the time we don't have to leave for it. With Katrina, we had to leave for 4 months. And the fact that I didn't have any of like my coping mechanisms and uses of like my normal game systems, it was all at my house, and I didn't know if that still existed. So it was like, all right, we're gonna go to the fundamentals. We have one game, we have one system that's on loan from this old grandpa family that took us in, and this is what we're gonna make work. And from there we were eventually able to like get my stuff back, and praise God, it wasn't like destroyed and gone. But there was that point that I was like, well, I guess this is the only game I have now. So that was like one reason why that one sits so strong in my memory now.
And this is the point of this topic, because think about how like some games like represent a point in time. Yeah. No matter what. And just before people start thinking, it's like, my mom is still alive. Just before you like, but it's just that memory is always a happy memory for me, considering all the hardships after. So just so you know how important it is to have something that speaks to you like in such a way that transcends just being something like, this is epic or something. So that's kind of like the point of this topic, in a way. Just kind of remember.
We're bringing it low today.
Yeah.
We're bringing it back.
Exactly. Especially that more the farther we get from something, the more like something will speak to you in a way. So, in a lesson, now moving on to the system that destroyed the N64, that generation, the PS1. The PS1, I remember buying it. It was way after it came out, maybe a year or two. The first 2 games I got for that system, ironically, was the first Gran Turismo and Hercules. From the animated, it was a side scroller that I still have installed in my PS3, because the PS3 is backwards compatible with like some digital PS1 games. However, that's not my favorite game. My favorite game from the PS1 is actually Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped.
Okay.
That is my favorite, because it was the last game I ever bought for that system, and I always remember it fondly because it was the game that I replayed the most. Because most of my now we went from nostalgia now to hilarity. The problem of doing this is that they scratch so many games. So many games that I used to have from PS1 were mostly scratched. Mega Man X5, some fighting games. Trying to remember, they had so many. I had Rainbow Six, and the original Rainbow Six. That's awful. That Rainbow Six, especially if you had, I didn't have the Dual Shock.
How did you play that game then?
Weirdly, you have to like aim with like the shoulder buttons. It's like that you turn around and go up.
When I have my turn, I can touch on that. But I know exactly what you're talking about. And goodness, so go ahead and finish.
So it was just a few final games that I had on PS1 that I could still like play, because I enjoyed the PS1 a lot. But Crash Bandicoot 3, I always remember, because it was to me, it was the peak of Crash Bandicoot at the time, before realizing that 2 is the better game now when you go to the Insane Trilogy collection. But back then, it was like just kind of it inserted time travel into my life before I ever saw Back to the Future personally. and and that game like introduced me like to like different eras or like different aesthetics, really cool music, fun platforming. At the time that I was like very adept to it, and I was like Crash Bandicoot is like so shockingly hard when you go when you go back, but but yeah, it was like, such a fun platform, and I'm glad that Crash Bandicoot now lives on again in the Insane trilogy, because now it has the proper code of pain, and they still play similarly most of the time, like
They
to how they do in PS1. So
and I wasn't a person that had the whole love for Crash Bandicoot because it was like before I was really knowledgeable about what was good
mhm.
for certain consoles. And so later on, like my brother had bought it and was playing it with his now wife, but it was really cool to see how well it translated,
Mhm.
which all you had to do was put a little bit of coat of paint on it and it worked fantastically.
Mhm.
And I can see how addicting that would have been as a kid back in
Yeah.
the day. And did they add like quality of life, or was it kind of just a one-to-one recreation?
Just slightly more precision, you could say, by being on a more analog control and a better controller.
Good point. Yeah.
Also, so, but at least the spirit of that game, like the different riding the motorcycle, the ships, the variety of levels. That game is just like a cacophony of variety.
Mm.
So, to me, that was like that was literally the last PS1 game I got before I moved on to the new new systems, and I'll always remember it for that, because the first game I never beat myself because it was damn hard. Still is if you're doing the Insane Trilogy, and Crash Bandicoot 2 I only rented. That's why I only beat it once. To 3, that's why 3 I always had it high on until before the collection, because it was the one that I just enjoyed. It was just a blanket. It was like, it was just precise. It was just fun. So Crash Bandicoot Warped was my favorite PS1 game of that era. Even though retroactively, I think you can argue Metal Gear Solid is the finest game of that system.
I just especially for what it was doing at the time.
Yeah.
For me, it's definitely not a indicator of quality at all, because PS1 was firmly the years of I had no idea what I was doing, and I would play.
So it was
games.
the license games, right?
It was absolutely the license. So I specifically remember one of the first games that I had was the running shooter Buzz Lightyear game.
Yes, from the game, from the from the TV show, right?
Which I realized was literally just Temple Run. But way before its time. But anyway, so I played that, the Atlantis the Lost Empire.
Yes, the platformer.
I have talked about on the stream.
Do you ever play
that? That was a game similarly to the Sonic trauma of that underwater sound when you're about to drown. I was so terrified of drowning my character that during the entirety of that water level, I was so afraid for the second that the water I would go underneath and there was a tunnel above my head, I would panic. And I would wait till it finished and I'd hit the reset button.
Now, do you ever play Toy Story 2 game that you also play as Buzz Lightyear?
I play, yes, but that was on PC actually. But I know exactly what you're talking about, and I played it until it stopped working. But that was such a cool game with like the 3D not over the shoulder, behind the back. And it was such a cool platform where you could just explore everywhere in the house. But oddly enough, none of this was like my actual stuff. That was just the first things that I played. And then, of course, what really brought it in, and he was the reason why I experienced a lot of this, from Rainbow Six, the original Siphon Filter games.
Oh, so you played the originals. I never played the original Siphon Filters.
I got to, but man, I am aware that they do not hold up very well, I don't think, because it was PlayStation 1 third-person shooter controls, and that was just like, there wasn't a lot going on. But what really stuck with me was the phase of time when Star Wars: The Phantom Menace came out. And,
yes, the Phantom Menace video game, Jedi Power Battles, Episode 1 Racer.
Yes, so Jedi Power Battles was my choice.
Yes.
As my favorite PS1 game, because...
Not a good game, but a hell of a good time.
It was, and I played it with my my brother and, of course, my uncle at alternating times, but it was so crazy because it, like, built the Star Wars canon for me, because it was the first time we got to see Mace Windu, Plo Koon, Adigala,
Adigalia. Yeah.
and then of course Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And this is before Mace Windu had his purple lightsaber, so he had a blue one.
A blue one, yeah.
Plo Koon had
a yellow one.
There we go.
Yeah,
and
he had a yellow
Adigala
one.
had
Yeah.
a red one, and she fought with like her crazy style. But it was like the perfect arcade fighter, like hack and slash game where you could get power-ups for your lightsaber that would like make it longer or more powerful, and then at the end you would fight Darth Maul together, and then I was like, oh, how are they gonna make Qui-Gon die in this? And then you would just win, and Qui-Gon was there at the end. I was like, what?
Yeah, alternate universe.
I was like, that was during a time when I thought if it happened in the movie, it had to happen in the game. But just the amount of hours that I could sink into that and the Phantom Menace game as it was, with its super archaic top-down view. But man, like the glowing effects in that game were so cool, and I was just obsessed with all of that. So that was me for PS1.
Yeah, that's what I miss about licensed games in a way, that they give you kind of that feeling. Obviously now we're getting the more AAA stuff, but they don't come out in like such frequency that it doesn't come. Just the idea of having that companion game was always so cool about that era, despite them not being good games. But that was what's so fun of being a kid. You didn't care about reviews. You didn't care about quality.
It was
once you cross that threshold, it's over.
I kind of wish I could go back to that, but now I'm like, I've tried to both go back to those games and to like play other shovelware, and it's like it's not even, it can't touch any of that.
Yeah, so now we're gonna move slightly towards the handheld. Game Boy Color for me was like, it's something that I briefly had because immediately a better handheld to me came out by the time I had it, which was the Game Boy Advance. But for Game Boy Color, to me, I will always relate it to the peak of me being very into the Pokemon anime. And specifically being able to like mix the love of that anime with the game that for me will always stand up for that era, which was Pokemon Yellow. So I played Red and Blue in computer actually, but on an actual Game Boy, Yellow was the one that I played there. That's the one that I finished from that era. And Pokemon, that's why I always... The original 150 will always have a special place because of being able to mix something tangible with the anime with something that I was playing. But seeing some Pokemon there that then I could find in the game and train with them, and going through the 8 original gym leaders and how tough it can be, and then also finding the Indigo virus thing that could quote unquote break your game if you didn't defeat him. And like specific, and then if you beat him, you get like all the plus 99 balls, everything, plus 99 potions. Yeah, it's like I will always remember Pokemon Yellow for that. There's so much from the Game Boy Color library that I never played, but that's the one that when I think of Game Boy Color,
that was back when we just didn't know what was good, and we would literally just get provided with a game by our parents, and they're like, "Yeah, this looks like what you would like, here you go," and that was what you played. And that was like, for all the people listening who are in our younger audience, this was back in the handheld time where you had to have a companion lamp.
Yes, because you couldn't see anything from
your
the
system,
from that stupid screen from the GBA. Man,
games were not backlit by themselves. You had to have a light on it to be able to see. So
that's why I moved on quickly to the Game Boy Advance, because this was before the SP.
Didn't have the backlit until the SP
because
later.
then the normal one came in with like the one that dad bought me. He bought the lamp that you put at the top of the game. So,
I honestly, I love that lamp. I would bend it all over the place and probably messed it up so much. For me, mine is a double whammy because I had a Game Boy game, which was Super Mario Land.
All right, yeah, that's the original Game Boy. I forgot.
Yeah. Because when I got my Game Boy Color, I wanted games for it that I recognized, and my parents had heard of Mario, and they went to a game trader, and they were like, of course, super expensive, and this one guy was standing outside because, I mean, you can't do this anymore, but he was like mad that they weren't letting him trade in the game for a lot of money, and so my dad bought it from him instead of the store, and so he just like gave him probably 10-15 bucks or something, because they were going to only give him like 2 or 3 even back then. And I mean, now think about an original Game Boy regular copy of Super Mario Land and how much that would probably go for.
You would be a millionaire if you could sell one of those.
Alas, mine does not work anymore. But back then it was crazy, because I mean, it was hard as hell. And I hated it for a while, but that was like literally the only Game Boy game I owned. And so like you had 3 lives and you had to make it work. And it's so rare you got 1-ups that it was just like, it was a dungeon crawler roguelike practically, where you just had to make it as far as you could. And once it ran out, you started the entire game over. Then Game Boy Color was, oddly enough, Wario Land 3.
Really? Hey, man.
Because I didn't own any other Mario games or anything else good. So like the bar was so low that literally it was between that and the Game Boy Color versions of Toy Story and the 101 Get Dalmatians game. I did not have a lot of good options.
Oh, man.
But
believe that. Those were the options back then.
Wario Land 3 had the most colors and had the most cohesive like understanding of what happened in the game. And so I just played that the most, as much as I understood. And I, of course, had no understanding of it, so I didn't play it long.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. Now, then obviously we got to Game Boy Advance. Game Boy Advance is always a funny one because it's people consider it the Super Nintendo Portable, because so many of those games are ported there. Even some games from early PS1, like the original Rayman, that was like a side scroller in PS1, was also a GBA game. That's the first one that I got, that I played from there. And also Earthworm Jim was also another game that was there in the GBA. But the game from GBA that I will always remember, because it felt very hardcore and it was my first introduction deeply into the series, Metroid Fusion. Metroid Fusion, still to this day, this is one of the... Metroid Fusion is this... I correlate this with both being my favorite game of the Game Boy Advance, and it's in my list of best games of all time that we'll do in a future episode. Metroid Fusion was my introduction to that Metroid style of exploration. Yeah. It was, to me, it was such a great Metroid to be introduced to, because... how can I say this? It's like, that game points you to where you need to go. Doesn't really tell you where you how to get to that place, but at least you have an idea. It was like a baby's first like Metroidvania in a way. I was like at least having an idea where to go and then just go there. It's obviously the opposite of something like Super Metroid, because Super Metroid is vague AF. It's almost crazy how vague it can be.
And we had this whole process back and forth. It's so weird that they never went back to that with Metroid Fusion, you know?
Exactly. Because then Metroid Dread walked that back, but Metroid Fusion just has the best atmosphere. Metroid Fusion has the coolest suit that you see early on in Dread. Metroid Fusion has the best art style, if anything, that stuck with me in the GBA when I played. And it's also one of the scariest games I played in the GBA back then, being pursued by the SAX, the clone of Samus, by the parasite, was always nerve-wracking. Even being able to like experience that game through the Game Boy emulator that I played after when I was on that Metroid binge after Dread back in like late 2021, if you remember. October, it feels like such long ago. I was just being reminded, as like, man, Metroid Fusion was a masterpiece, and I'm so glad that was what introduced Metroid to me, because other than that, I tried Prime at the same time. Prime didn't click with me because I didn't have that mentality for exploration that I have now. Fusion did it right for my Weevil 9-10-year-old that I was. So Metroid Fusion, my favorite Game Boy Advance game. How about you?
So Game Boy Advance was where I started to expand myself a little bit, because the Game Boy Advance could just take a beating. It lasted for a lot longer for me, I think, or at least I bought it earlier on in the cycle. Yeah. And
I got the upgrade with the SP. The SP is a fine piece of machine.
That was one that I ended up skipping at the time, but boy did I feel that jump to the DS when it happened. But back at it was such honorable mentions as the Lord of the Rings Two Towers game.
Yes, it's on Game Boy.
Which was basically Diablo. And it was crazy.
Being able to play that on a Game Boy. I played the Return of the King one on
Oh
GBA.
no, you see, okay, so the Two Towers game that we know and on like PS2 was not it at all.
Yeah, it wasn't. It
Yeah,
was
it
different in
was
the
like
Game Boy. It was Diablo. It
completely
was a
different.
top-down
Yeah, yeah,
thing,
yeah. Okay.
sprite-based thing. Yeah.
But it was just, it was so cool.
Mhm.
And then you could have like shields and all that awesome
It had
stuff.
loot, all of that. It was like it had more depth than these hack and slash PS2 games.
Yeah. So that was like one of those ones that I just adored, and I don't even think I ever beat the Moria segment, but it was just so cool that I love playing it anyway. I played a few other things, but like Superstar Saga, the RPG,
The
with
Mario. Yes.
yeah. Because that was like the first true turn-based RPG I think I really played.
Yeah,
And
mine
that
was
before
Pokemon.
I
Yeah.
understood what that was. Yeah, because I skipped Pokemon until the DS, which we'll talk about in a minute. But really, the main one was Super Mario World. That was the one with the cape and the
That's the Super
Superman
Nintendo, and that's the
run.
thing. That's a Super Nintendo game. So
Exactly, and
yeah.
I didn't know that it was until way later.
see how great GBA was to be able to like reintroduce Super
Yep.
Nintendo style things into it, because A Link to the Past was also GBA.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, so
And then, I mean, eventually I played Chain of Memories and the Kingdom Hearts game
Yeah.
for anybody listening, and a few others. But the Super Mario World was definitely it, especially when there was like those days of rumors of, oh, if you do this at this place, you can get this thing, and that's how I found out that you could like not really break the game, but you can fly in such a way that you can get super high up and you could just bypass the entire levels. So it became my life's mission to try finding that in every level that I could. And I never actually beat it because I got to this point in a forest area later on that it would like bring me in a circle and I could not figure out where it wanted me to go. And I just finishing the level wouldn't let me progress. So it ended up being like a secret door that I had to find to progress the game, and I was like, this is bullcrap, I'm leaving. But until then it was fantastic of a game and I loved it.
there you go. So now I'm gonna like dive tail out of handhelds for a little bit and jump into PC. Obviously PC all encompassing because it's many people's preferred way to play, even to today for people that have all the higher end PCs and all that. My best PC memory came around 2002 and 2003 because that's when I played Age of Mythologies, for the Age of Empire spin-off.
Yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
Age of Mythologies is to me the defining PC experience of something that was so unique PC in a way that because at that point I had played some shooters in other consoles. I've seen what else, but an RTS of mythology. Age of Mythologies was like the introduction to me of like really liking the Greek pantheon, Zeus, the Kraken, all of that. Being able to build your settlements and not knowing that games could be that deep back then. I was like, man, I can build this entire city. Oh my god, the Kraken's there. Oh, can I fight the Kraken? Even though it was just a sprite from the top. And then be able to build a temple that then you can bring in some of the gods to strike forward. I play that game obsessively. And even just staying in one, you could advance to different areas, but I would just stay in my settlement, just keep like defending it and constructing and seeing it happen. It was so dynamic. And I hate that there's no way for Age of Mythologies to happen in a modern way. It's just Age of Empires. Age of Empires is cool, but I just like gods. The gods, it was just much cooler. I got that and Battlefield 1942 at the same time. That's when I started diving into PC gaming, and those Battlefield games was like, if you're playing them single player, it was just against bots, like the maps. So it was like it didn't make the impression that Age of Mythologies did. And of course, if you move forward with PC gaming, now you can see how great it can be. I've seen it with my brother, but Age of Mythology was like that one PC game that was just such a PC game. So yeah, that's my favorite PC game. How about you? What did you experience in your machine?
So as a kid, I had my dad, being a businessman, really wanted me to play games that I would learn something with. So once I got past the kid level of things, he got me Sim Coaster.
Ooh.
And which that taught me the building blocks of capitalism and economics, which I actually kept through the entirety of playing Civilization 3 so much My gosh, I got that at a Scholastic Book Fair book order, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made because it was just it was the entirety of Civilization 3 and all of the expansions, and I could just play the whole game on my PC. Later on, it was Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, which was the first ability to build your own Jurassic Park
Mm-hmm.
and raise the dinosaurs, all that cool stuff. And then but none of this is as much as when I finally bought my first gaming PC a few years ago, and I like the first thing I bought was Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast.
Jedi Outcast. Yeah, I
Yeah.
played that on GameCube at first.
I that was golly. I
That was a
played it
hardcore
very-
game.
It was very hard too. But it was so fun. So anyway, this was like on the back end of I played a very, very small amount of it at my cousin's house on PC again. But because the first 2 or 3 levels are so night and day different from the later half of it, that like I didn't really like it because it just gave me a headache. It wasn't fun. It was obtuse. The shooting was weird. And it's so weird how like they just take a huge shift once you decide to become a Jedi, that it's like, yeah, so you're gonna get like force powers now, and
When
it's
you meet
all
Luke.
about building that up. Yeah, when you meet Luke, and when you get out of that, it's just, oh my goodness, the ability for all that. And with the console commands, I added in the like dismemberment to like 900 and all that stuff. It was like required for me because it was so hard to actually play that game that you would just die so quick. So I'd keep giving myself extra lives and extra health to make it through the
The
game.
level design of that game was just so obtuse, but it was like because it
really
was like
was.
very intricate. That is like, oh yeah, this tiny place, this is where you can go. Everyone praises Dark Souls for that kind of intricate level design in modern gaming, but that's Jedi Knight levels in a
That's
way.
really where a lot of it began, honestly. But and then they managed to continue it for like Jedi Academy, but I just really love the
Yeah,
more
but it wasn't
simplistic-
Jedi Academy more a multiplayer thing? There wasn't much of a story in that.
That wasn't until Jedi Academy was its own storyline. You created your own character and you were an apprentice to Kyle Katarn.
Oh, okay.
And it was like its own plot line. The Sith are coming back and everything, and you could choose to be a light or dark side. And based on how you would play would determine, I don't know if it determined the ending or not, but it would determine how people like viewed you, because you could start using like force lightning and stuff, and like they really added to the force side of it because they realized people only cared about the latter half of Jedi Outcast. And so they really brought into that. That is where the multiplayer started to begin, because you could go into lobbies and play against other people and stuff, which later on now we have movie battles, which is the mod for Jedi Academy that allows you to play the complete saga and all of like the biggest lightsaber battles with completely revamped from the ground up lightsaber combat systems. Like you make one move and like their head is gone. You can die very quickly, that whole thing. But anyway, Jedi Outcast was my favorite for sure.
And you played the best version because I played it originally on GameCube, and it's available on PS4 and Switch if anyone wants to try them.
I tried it on PS4 and it's hard. It is so hard. So buyer beware on that.
Oh yes, it's an old game, but now moving from PC, now we're moving into one of the more diverse generations, Paul, the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. And let me start with the GameCube. The GameCube was actually the first one that I got from those three. I got PS2 later, even though the PS2 came earlier. But the GameCube, we got it originally because my dad saw Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader being played. And that's still, like, to me, still the greatest Star Wars game ever made. I recently played it again on my Wii with backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
I miss that kind of dogfighting for it to be available. Like, Squadrons didn't quite have the itch there because it was exclusively in first person and it was more of a sim. I miss that kind of like more arcadey flying around and shooting, but that's not my favorite GameCube game. My favorite GameCube game, Paul, I think you know what it is. It's a game that
Probably so.
It's a game that every Nintendo Direct that we receive I always hold every sliver of hope that they're just gonna be like, it's coming back. You know what it is. You can say it.
It's Wind Waker.
There we go. Yeah. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, just like Mario 64 is some of my best memories that I have playing with my mom something. Wind Waker is my best memories playing with my sister. Because Wind Waker, other than its amazing art style that back then got a lot of shit, that's not so appreciated now. Back then, my sister and I were always so in love with it. To the point that then when we learned that if you connected your Game Boy Advance with the link cable that connected to the GameCube, there was co-op where she could play as Tingle, have the map, do bombs, and all that, and do it together, being able to play the rest of that game with her after you unlock Tingle. And going through that story, learning, especially us having like, at the time I don't think we have fully finished Ocarina of Time, but we knew about most of it because we had seen parts of it because we had friends that brought in their N64 copy that had the later parts of the game. So I was getting that reference and just being able to share with her such a cool, whimsical, memorable experience that even as we both suffered through the Triforce quest at the end, it's still something that, to me, that's still the quintessential GameCube game. And knowing that I played a little bit of the Wii U version when our friend PJ let me borrow his Wii U back in like 2017 and got to play for it a little bit and getting to be reminded of just how great that game holds up in its HD release and how they fixed that late end quest. And just my desire for that game to be re-released in a modern times, for people for that to remain so easily accessible to next generations, because I don't think we'll ever see a Zelda in the Wind Waker style again, because how many years have passed now? We're in year 20 of that original release. So
Gosh.
Can you believe that? But it's just Wind Waker to me is still the most memorably beautiful Zelda ever. It's just its soundtrack, its story. It's a definition of epic. So
I think it's like the perfect summary of what Legend of Zelda should be.
Mm-hmm.
Because shocker, mine is also Wind Waker, and I'll tell like a brief story and try to keep it brief about the whole process of getting the GameCube in the first place. But Wind Waker was where it like really clicked for me, where it was like, oh, this really simplistic style is actually really cool and really useful and really awesome. I love the whole idea of the boat stuff, and even though it was like kind of dragging in some areas, getting from one place to the next, it was like,
it felt like an adventure.
It really did. It felt like, I mean, you had that, I could hear the music playing in my head.
That's why too, it's like, that's next to Mario 64 the other kind of soundtrack that can make me teary-eyed just as remembering the good times, because it has that kind of like cheerful nostalgia to it.
But
and
like, I think what I love the most about Wind Waker is, even though it had the cutesy style, it was terrifying in so many ways, because I mean, once it got dark, once the storms rolled in, there were like the re-deads, just like the stuff that could really happen in this world that was like, yes, this is on the surface like cutesy bright colors and child, but this is like really messed up stuff going on in the background. And I think there was like that teetering on the edge of for kids and not for kids that was really cool to me as sort of a kid, but not really.
Yeah, the Tower of the Gods was terrifying. The Earth Temple with some of their version of the zombies from Ocarina of Time was terrifying. It was it's just such a special game. Nintendo, please just give us the Switch version. We know you have it. I want to re-experience it in better hardware. So
yeah, let me just briefly say that the only reason I even got a GameCube was actually after Katrina again, was because we didn't really have any of our stuff, and there was a pre-owned GameCube for sale that my brother and I split the price of to buy, so we could have something to play. And we had Pikmin, Mario Baseball, and I think that was it for a little while. And then later on we got Smash Bros. Melee, and that was like all of that stuff. But just the whole fact that like I almost didn't even get a GameCube because I was so firmly in the PS2 era that I'm really glad that all of that had ended up happening.
Yeah, it's just like the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is like the cream of the crop of my favorite memories. But shout out to the Mario parties that came out on GameCube. Shout out to Double Dash, Super Mario Sunshine. I absolutely adore. And despite it like getting so much crap for so many people, but Mario Sunshine is just like such a complete package for me. And getting to like experience it again on the Switch is like, yeah, this is still a really good game. I know it's not the best Mario, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Obviously, Twilight Princess. Eventually, I played Twilight Princess first on GameCube before the Wii.
Same.
So it's like
you can't beat Wind Waker.
Exactly, you can't beat Wind Waker. Even Metroid Prime recently finally finishing it for the first time.
Yeah.
That was like, I bet if I had beaten it back then, it would have made such an impression. But I feel it's just Wind Waker just lingers in the mind in a way that is so unique, that holds up so well that many other games just don't.
It does.
But PS2, Paul, the PS2 was my system during that generation. And I got it a year after. Well. So I got it a year after the GameCube. In fact, I got it the same day I went to see Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. And what's funny is that my dad was in such a Star Wars kick with after watching that movie that he remembers seeing that there was like a Star Wars Episode 2 adjacent game, Star Wars Jedi Starfighter, that was on PS2. So that's why we went immediately to get to go get the PS2 then, and just that initial batch of games that I got: Medal of Honor Frontline, Jedi Starfighter, the Donald Duck video game, the Monsters Inc. Silent Scope, Eco from the Shadow of the Colossus team. Like, that was all the games that I had, and then just building that library of licensed games. Then culminating, the last game I ever got in that system was Shadow of the Colossus, and that's still I talked so much about Shadow of the Colossus in this show. How much that game, as the departing PS2 memory for me, was like such an impactful and telling me how games could be artsy and impactful. That's in one of my best games of all time list, but I want to talk about games that really remind me of the PS2. And I can't talk about PS2 without talking about Star Wars Battlefront 2. Come on. Star Wars Battlefront 2, my God, I played that game to death. Just the idea of having because Battlefront 2 on PS2 was the perfect Star Wars video game.
The
definitive package.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Airspace battles. Being able to play as the Jedis and the Sith and the heroes and villains in all the planets.
One game mode where
heroes and villains and Mos Eisley. I played that to death. I played and replayed the Galactic Conquest with all four of the classes, and always doing different strategies all the time. That game had insane replay value, and it had online, and I didn't even play online. That game was just so infinitely replayable. The campaign, even in its simplicity, was such a cool idea, being able to play in the eyes of the battalion of Darth Vader. From the fall of the Republic to the rise of the Empire. It was that and a great game to play co-op also on the PS2. There were so many games that were so great to play on co-op, including like the Lord of the Rings: Return of the King was another one that I play a lot with friends. Obviously, that also birthed FIFA in my friend group, and everyone that listened to episode 51 will know how I feel about FIFA, and for people to have an idea how long that resentment started building up for. But a great era of Need for Speed games, Spider-Man 2. It was like the PS2 was just the system, and then even like I think I know what your favorite game is. I didn't even play this, and it's just an idea of how the breadth of content the PS2 had. But Battlefront 2, as such a lover of Star Wars, because I was so in love with Star Wars Episode 3, and being able to both have the Episode 3 video game and Battlefront 2 in the same year.
Was fantastic of a game. I'll jump in because PS2, I could literally talk for an entire episode just on the games from the PS2 era, and the ridiculous breadth, like you said, of what you could find from every style.
Do you remember going into EB Games or GameStop and seeing just the PS2 sections?
So much, yes. I would spend, because this was once again during the Katrina era. Right after Katrina, we actually had our church in a mall, and down the hallway was a game trailer. every single week, right after the message was done, I would just hang out in there for hours because they had the Halo 2 demo on repeat in there. But I would sit there and I'd go and look at every single case. I'd read the back of it. It was just how I killed time. So that was where I had all of those crazy times. SOCOM Navy SEALs 1 and 2, all of the Metal Gear Solid. Well, let's see.
2 and 3.
2
and 3 were on PS2.
And just all of the crazy amounts of licensed games. The Lord of the Rings 2 Towers and Return of the King that we already talked about.
Final Fantasy 10 and 12, 10-2.
Blanking out all of a sudden. The Devil May Cry games.
Yeah, came out there.
The entire series. The just God of War, all of that stuff. But so I could just keep talking, but I'm going to focus on the fact that Kingdom Hearts 2 happened.
Yeah,
and 1. I mean, the series began there, but 2 was where it really kicked off for me. And I didn't even really respect the way that it could be. And I'm only going to talk about this one point and then I'll give it back over. Because at first I played through the game and I just mashed buttons until I won. And that was great because I loved goofy anime nonsense and I loved Disney. So that was like all I needed. And then later on, when I was in college, my friend was playing through it because the HD collections were coming out.
On PS3?
He explained the depth of the summons and the drive forms unlocking passive abilities for Sora, and the fact that you could like fly and teleport and do this ridiculous nonsense in the combos that I had never even considered blew my mind. And then it just became this game that I could just keep replaying over and over again, and it was like my nostalgia and then just the fun of playing that game because it just felt so good. But that was it for me, and I could just talk forever about
that's how great the PS2 is. It's like that's why there's a reason that system has sold 155 million units, other than the fact that it was the cheapest DVD available at the time. The library, the PS2 is the home of variety.
Yes.
All genres were there. They were not dominated by one style of game. There was everything there. And we could really just talk about the PS2 so long. It's like I freaking love that machine. But then the other machine that was probably my least favorite of the three, even though it had some cool games, but some of the few games were really stand out, the original Xbox. Ironically, Halo wasn't part of my Xbox experience on the original. I knew it was there. I knew it existed. I borrowed the original game and played it up until the Silent Cartographer. And I also played at my uncle's place in New York in 2004. I played the beginning of Halo 2, the space invasion. But the original Xbox was what introduced me to stealth. And because it was before Metal Gear, I didn't play Metal Gear until after I played here. Yeah. And the best the best of the best happened there. Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, the third Splinter Cell game, building up from the original from the original Splinter Cell that was my first ever Xbox game, and then Pandora Tomorrow that came immediately after. But then Chaos Theory, some of the best co-op experiences I ever had, ironically, the friend that came to play with me at my home on episode 51, he's the one I played Splinter Cell with, Chaos Theory co-op back then with him. The level of depth in level design in Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, and being able to give the depth of doing full-on violent playthroughs, full-on stealth playthroughs, the birth of me doing full-on stealth playthroughs of any game that allows stealth was birthed there. It had at the time it was the most realistic game I'd ever seen, especially on Xbox, and surprisingly holds up really well if you play it on Xbox One. It has great darkness, especially with the contrast of the goggles. And obviously the Splinter Cells that came afterward became more action oriented, but Chaos Theory was like the perfect, for stealth aficionados that are about the subtlety of things. Chaos Theory was it's high on top for me, and it's still to this day I associate it so strongly with the Xbox because that game came out on PS2. I also played the PS2 version. The PS2 version sucks compared to the Xbox version. The Xbox version was complete compared to the other ones, but For the original Xbox, Paul, you didn't own one, right?
I did not, but I did have. That was where I first experienced Halo 1 because our church youth group had an Xbox with Halo 1 in it, and one day somehow they left the door unlocked. So us kids were able to find our way in there. We turned on this giant projector, and we all played like free for all. 1v1v1v1 and we each time one of us would die, we'd hand it over to the next person, and that was ridiculous. But that would probably be it. The only close runner-up was Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, which I had my first experience technically on PC for the first one, but the second one was 100% Xbox original. And that blew my mind for what was possible for video games, because I'd never seen something so in-depth with story that made me feel emotion for like what people have felt for like Mass Effect. That was what Knights of the Old Republic was doing for me back then.
Yeah, I hated that I never experienced Knights of the Old Republic, especially knowing where that story goes. But I get that redemption moment of getting to experience that full game with the remake that's coming. So
I hope so, because my goodness, like, it does not hold up at all for me personally. It's impossible. But for its time, when I had seen nothing like that, it was like, wait, I can be mean to people? Wait, I can like choose to let this person die? That's a thing?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even know that was possible.
People still stand by the story of that game, and I got the Switch version that came out for Knights of the Old Republic, and it has some roughness, but I can see how that story holds up. It's so extremely well written.
I would say the story's the only thing that could really hold up, and even like the dialogue, I would say, was delivered really well with a lot of passion.
And the sort of turn-based combat that game has works better on like a handheld currently. So
I could see that for sure, and it plays almost like a mobile game nowadays, but it's like, just gosh, for what it was fantastic. But anyway,
the original Xbox. It's like my love for Xbox grew after, but the original Xbox has some gems there. But now let's dive into some handhelds again, Paul. The Nintendo DS, because I got the DS after I got these 3 home consoles, and I will always remember the DS for giving me Super Mario 64 back, with like the being able to play as Luigi, Wario, and Yoshi. Even though you started the game as Yoshi, which was weird, it was like me that I knew that game front to back. It was like felt almost sacrilegious. It's like, wait, I'm starting a game as Yoshi? This is weird. I'm not starting as Mario. It's called Super Mario 64. But yeah, like there's a couple Spider-Man games that I played during the DS. The WarioWare from DS was awesome, and a bunch of also licensed titles. But the game that I played the most and replayed many times, because it was crazy to see that kind of game in that kind of art style at the time, and it's still to me the definitive Nintendo DS game, is New Super Mario Brothers. That came out there, and it was like being able to have like 3D Mario, but as a side scroller. We haven't had a side scrolling Mario in so long, and
they're obsessed with that 3D.
Yeah, and then being able to see it that way, and at the time such a creative way. Like being able to transform into gigantic Mario to destroy the levels, but if you did it too often, maybe you would screw yourself from a secret. So there was like extra depth for replayability there. And obviously, New Super Mario Bros. Gets a lot of shit now because the formula was repeated too often. There was a sequel that came out on 3DS, the Wii version, the Wii U version, and all looking the same. That's why a lot of people were like, yeah, this is Super Mario, but you cannot underestimate, you cannot undersell just how important that original New Super Mario Bros. Was for the Nintendo DS, and how fun and great that original idea was. So definitely. That was my favorite the Nintendo DS game.
My favorite DS game was probably the first one I ever played on the DS, even though I kind of expanded out from there.
It's still the one you remember the most.
Diamond.
Oh, really? That was your first one?
That was my first Pokemon. That was my first game I played on the DS, and I was hooked because I think I've said this once before, but basically I still had my Game Boy Advance. They bought my brother a DS for some reason, and they even offered to buy me a DS as well because they knew we would fight over it. And I was like, no, it's fine. I've got all my stuff on the Game Boy Advance.
That was always a problem with me and my brother also. I understand that.
It was really funny. They were like, "All right, fine," and they bought it right before one of our trips out to Destin, actually. And so on the way out, they bought my brother the DS and they bought him Pokemon Diamond. And I sat there and I looked over his shoulder and I was like, wait, this is kind of interesting. Hold on a second. What is this? What is that? Like, because we'd watch like the show, we kind of knew the whole idea behind it, but like watching it happen where you could get the Pokemon and play with the Pokemon and like explore the world, and I'd like once seen Pokemon Yellow played in front of me, so I was like, this is all new to me, and I was like, all right, Cody, here we go. How about like I'll take it from you every once in a while whenever you think it's a little difficult, and I'll play a little bit. We could take turns. That sound fair? And he's like, yeah, okay. And so we just like the trip up there, he got to play it for 3 hours. I got to play it for 2 hours, and I sat there and I just went bonkers with like, wait, you can do all of this cool stuff, what? And as soon as we got back, I was like, all right, so I changed my mind. I want a DS and I want Pokemon Diamond. And so I bought it, or they bought it for me, and I played it nonstop. And then even after that, every year I would play Pokemon Diamond when we would go to Destin, and I played it so much.
Pokemon is perfect travel game. That's how it was for me with Jello.
Yeah.
And then the next one I played was Sapphire in GBA, but I never played the DS ones, but they're all basically the same game anyway. So,
more or less, but like for whatever reason, I happen to have the great fortune of picking a very good Pokemon game as well. So ever since, it's all like I've compared it to Pokemon Diamond, and none of it has come up close because it's just so good during that time. But yeah, so that was it for me on the DS, and like I didn't even play too much else on it besides like your usual Marios and some other things. But Pokemon was
I never played the Zeldas in the DS, especially because knowing that they were controlled with the stylus. That's why I was like that era of Zelda just washes me over. So
I played the one where he was on the steamboat. Yeah, that was actually kind of fun
because there was Phantom Hourglass, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks.
Spirit Tracks. I think I watched my brother play that one. He was obsessed with that. That was during the era of like Wind Waker Link, because that was where you had Minish Cap and Four Swords.
Yeah, to me, I don't know. Just the idea of just controlling everything with the stylus just seemed weird for me. I just couldn't get into.
Another one that was really cool was Pokemon Ranger, because that was where you did like the circle around it, and then there was one that was basically Pokemon with dinosaurs, and they'd use that. But that was like,
this was the worst of Nintendo's gimmicks sometimes, but hey, some people really love those games.
They were experimental, and I respected them for it.
But then a system that didn't experiment much, it was just basically a handheld. The PSP, Paul. PSP, always the idea of the PSP was so cool to me, but it's a system that I barely played anything on, because those games here were so damn expensive, and the only way for me to play anything was trying to hack it to get because the PSP was so easy. The PSP was sold so much because it was so easily hackable, and I could see why. But the game that I always remember the PSP for, because it was my introduction to that franchise, because I was surprised that my dad wanted to play it. God of War: Chains of Olympus.
Wow.
I didn't play God of War 1 and 2 on PS2. I was too young for them, and I had heard stuff. I had heard there's nudity, there's ultra violence.
Things.
Yeah, so it was like, I don't think I'm not at the age for this. And then when we got a PSP, I remember renting Chains of Olympus and playing it. I was like, this is fun. Wow. Because it was like just there. You can't understand, like, if you like really gamey games, just the quickness of that combat. It's just how addictive. It's like it's old school in a way, but it's just in a way that just so dang addicting that you just kept playing. And I kept playing it, and then my dad was like, he had heard, because he was using the PSP a lot. We had gotten the Call of Duty game that came out there, so those were weird times. It was like he really wanted to play on the PSP, so he was like, where are you playing? I'm playing this God of War. Let me see. I was like, oh no, okay. And then I let him go. Next thing I know, he doesn't give me the system back. I was like, what's happening? I just keep playing and playing and playing and playing, and he absolutely beat it in one sitting. I was like, holy crap. He actually did it. He did beat it. And then I got it back and I beat it myself. I was like, man, that's like, what did he see that was? And then I saw it. I was like, wow, this is like, I can see why these games on PS2 were so big, because this game is just so damn fun. That's, I think, what defines those early God of War games. It's like, it's just a definition of fun gameplay.
I am so glad I ended up when I was working for GameStop and they let you borrow certain games. When the PS3 HD remastered collection or whatever came out, I binged the entirety of all of them, and it was crazy because I'd never obviously played any of that. And when I got to, I was like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. And then when you capped it off with God of War 3 at the end of playing that, and the huge jump in quality was just mind-boggling.
Ironically, God of War 3 was when my dad lost interest because of the violence.
So crazy. I mean, well, yeah, that was probably the worst of the bunch, I would say. But
and then even Ascension was equally violent. But
honestly,
yeah, it was
I don't know if Ascension was really as bad as 3.
It had some close-ups that a bunch of violent close-ups. But the thing is that 3 was more striking in its violence because it was more a rage thing. So, but Ascension had more details. So there was some detail that I was like, dang, this is what HD graphics do now. But God of War Chains of Olympus really showed that you can make a game work on the PSP that apparently was just as good as the PS2 versions, as I later found out. And that's still, to me, I associated both those two together. What was your PSP game, Paul?
Mine was a game that, as life has aged, did not age very great. However, for its time, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, yes. I've heard, because I wasn't a big Final Fantasy guy, but I knew how big that game was.
To this day, the best Final Fantasy thing I think I might have ever played. Don't fight me, guys.
Yeah, because I've learned you've never finished a single game other than 15.
Not a main one, no. And that was my first experience to actually Final Fantasy VII and all that, because I never played the originals because I was too young for that. I also didn't know what I was supposed to be looking for. This was I remember seeing a trailer for it at one of the G4 TV times, and I was like, what is this? This is nuts. Because you were seeing Angeal run around with a giant sword on his back, and I was like, I feel like I remember that sword. I don't know where. And then it wasn't until later on that I made the connection between that to actually Final Fantasy VII and Cloud, because I knew him from Kingdom Hearts originally.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh yeah, he's from this crazy game and he looks totally different, but he's still got the spiky hair. And just playing through Zach's storyline, honestly, with no knowledge of Final Fantasy VII, made it this crazy, epic story of a dude that's doomed to fail from the beginning. And then just playing through this, he's goofy, but he's endearing. How he lines up with Aerith and that whole process, and then seeing the government that he loves betray him, because I didn't know Shinra was evil in Final Fantasy VII. So they were this cool benevolent company that was helping him fight monsters. That's all I knew. And then all of a sudden he gets exposed to the Mako and they just turn on him. And when he's the whole last part of the game is him trying to run from the government and being hunted down ruthlessly. And for the last mission, spoilers for a game that's very old, with him facing off against this whole army, just slowly losing ability to move around, was making me tear up watching this guy still try to fight and dying brutally with bullet holes all in his body by the end.
Remake references that scene, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is almost exactly one-to-one how it was, where he does his whole speech, he hides Cloud, all the dudes are there, he makes a final thing, and he's just let's get it. Except that's the whole thing, is he dies at the end of that. He has this whole moment where he gives Cloud his sword and he's like, you're the one now, live for me. And that's when Cloud's mind just breaks. But in Remake, he survives and you're like, what?
Right, yeah.
Pardon me? That's not supposed to happen. So that's why, for me personally, I was losing my mind at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, because I'm like, oh, that might not even be good, frankly, because the stuff that might lead to. So yeah, anyway, just the way that you could play that game was so fun. It was basically like Kingdom Hearts with like a dodge button and all that stuff. And I just hated the RNG elements of your super moves, but at the same time, it was so cool. And
Yeah,
I loved it.
I can say I wish I could have played it back then because again I wasn't into Final Fantasy, so
Yeah.
I got into it much later. But
And nowadays it's like, even if they put it out on console, I don't know if it would hold up very well at all.
yeah.
But yeah.
But hey, we get Stranger of Paradise now. That's what we get
Crisis
now.
Core had to die on console so Stranger Paradise could live.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Paul,
out
out of handheld, now we're going into probably the console generation that forever shaped me going forward, the 360 PS3 Wii generation.
Yes.
So the Xbox 360 is the first one I had of all these three, and wasn't expecting to get it when I did, but just it being the console that introduced me to basically HD gaming, getting that next gen jump from like the original Xbox to how games looked there, and that initial batch of games that I played, Call of Duty 2, Battlefield 2 Modern Combat, NBA 06, seeing like a next gen sports game, how it looked there with like the sweat and all that, and Fight Night, my god, it was like such striking stuff. And also seeing Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, that till this day still holds up shockingly well visually.
Seeing some gameplay of it.
And just that early 360 era was so special, and that's what introduced me to Halo. Also, Halo 3 was my first Halo, because I came to play 1 and 2 until the collection in 2014. But 3, even not knowing the context, really hits as a really fun shooter. But the game that defines the 360 era, shockingly, and it's what gave me all this knowledge that I still use to this day in this subject matter, is Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Marvel Ultimate Alliance is what made the Marvel universe for me. It showed me every facet of it, getting to learn the trivia of every single corner of that universe, and seeing that then be reflected in comics and then movies that I would see going forward. When people ask me where I've learned a bunch of stuff, it was a Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Getting to learn every single corner of that universe is such a fun way, in that Diablo style camera at the top, dungeon crawler, where you had this massive cast of characters. It's so funny, like seeing people that I really praise. Look at how great the cast of Marvel's Avengers is growing now, like, and I'm like, did you guys play Marvel Ultimate Alliance back then? Because back then you started with 24 characters that all, in a way, it's like characters like the Hulk or the Thing wouldn't feel like you would expect based on like the kind of perspective. But at the time in 2006, that was comic book game Nirvana. It was, he just had everything. This was prior to Batman Arkham Asylum that finally did like a proper 3D game and elevated it. But at the time I was more of a Marvel guy, because I was a bigger fan of like the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man, and I got all three of them in one game. And facing off against Galactus, learning who Mephisto was, getting to go through Asgard, fighting the Frost Giants, Doctor Doom being the ultimate villain. I played that, I kid you not, I think I beat that game 50 times in like 2 years. I would play and replay it all the time in different difficulties, doing different combinations of characters, play it in co-op. It was a fun drop-in, drop-out co-op game. Marvel Ultimate Alliance really defined that 360 era for me. It's incredible. That is like, that game I can play it now on PS4, so it's not necessarily a 360 game, but that's when I experience it. And that's like the game that I think of. Man, I really sunk a ton of time into this game, and that's why I became such a big Marvel guy at the time. DC, the TV shows have made me more of a DC guy that came out after, but at the time Marvel was defined by this game. I love it so much.
I would say, oddly enough, so all of my Marvel knowledge came from Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. Just a little trivia moment, because that's where like I found out about Moon Knight, Black
Luke
Widow,
Cage,
Silver
Sable.
Yeah, Silver Sable, and all of those like huge casts from all that. Though that was for that. But gosh, the 360 era was ridiculous, and I, once again, just like the PS2 era, I could talk for hours.
Yeah, I would say the PS2 and the 360 as consoles give similar vibes in the kind of in all the experiences it gave us.
It was just where you had all of the games basically. So I'll just keep it short. Halo 3 was one of the first. That, and then BioShock Infinite.
Yeah, near
Like
the very
right
end.
at the end, the very like that was the capstone for like where it kind of began with Knights of the Old Republic for what I thought games could do. BioShock Infinite like closed out that whole just
Loop.
string of what a game could make me think about and feel just as a concept.
Yeah.
So like
I need to replay it.
Whenever I think back on it, I mean, I still, like I've mentioned, I'll go through it every couple of years just to feel that again, because it's solid shooting. It's a really great cast with dialogue that just holds up to this day. I love the setting. We just don't talk about Burial at Sea at all.
I like Burial at Sea.
I like the first part of Burial at Sea. I did not like the second.
I like the second part more.
I know, because that's like, it's just what goes to show with your stealth.
Yeah, exactly.
You would love the stealth, and I just honestly, I just didn't like the way it wrapped up the plot line. Where
that's the only thing. It felt a little too contrived how it tried to connect itself to the original
where
BioShock.
It was like, oh, this. I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and spoil it because I think that people should go find that out themselves. But the way they did that was like, really, guys. Really, that's what you're gonna do instead of making things kind of tie off the way they should have right then. Anyway, just BioShock Infinite is a fantastic game, and I know it had its troubled problems, and people kind of hate on it for not having what it
nowadays,
should
yeah.
But gosh, that the feeling of like you've had in the past where your jaw is on the floor after the credits begin to roll was me, and that was like the first and one of the only times it's really happened to me.
The end of BioShock Infinite is a punch. It really is like,
I felt hollow, but in such a way that after I processed it, I felt so much better about everything leading after that. And yeah, so that's one of the main reasons, honestly, that BioShock Infinite might be like my definitive favorite game from 360.
Yeah, that to me is rough because I experienced it on PS3. So
yeah,
so that's a difference for me there. But just that year that BioShock Infinite, The Last of Us, and GTA 5 all came together. 2013 was an absolutely crazy way for that generation to end. But yeah, obviously then the PS3 from this generation, obviously a console that didn't start well at all. With that expensive price that somehow I still got it at that price because my 360 cost me $50 more because I bought it here, and my dad bought the PSP over there. I told that story before in one of our mid episodes from like last year. And the PS3 was just rough because I always mention how I just prefer everything on 360. I had my unfortunate thing of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare being put on PS3 instead of 360 when I was in a big Call of Duty binge at the time. But to me, the game that justified that system, and it's always going to be my favorite there, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, is like
I knew that would be.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 are like, obviously didn't put in my favorite because that's the thing, that's like, those are some of the best experiences I had on PS2. My favorite memory is Battlefront 2, how much I played that game, but there was just something about the nutty story that I first experienced Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 before going back to 1 to really experience the story from the very beginning. And Metal Gear Solid 4, I've said it before, it's like, it's crazy how it's the first time I ever experienced like a very definitive ending to like a long-running story that felt like that you felt that catharsis of all the narratives being closed in such an insane way, because Kojima at the time was like, this is the final one, so I'm not gonna leave any loose ends. Everything's gonna get closure here. And as a closure, I don't think you can do it better than Metal Gear Solid 4. Going back to Shadow Moses, a game that I didn't even experience back in PS1, but having recently experienced it and just feeling the weight of this game began this year, this specific subset of this series began in this place, and now you're seeing it again much later with an older character to feel the passage of time. And yeah, I think Metal Gear Solid 4 really defines the whole you're getting old experience, and I feel it's like the ultimate fan service, and it is what justified anyone getting a PS3 early on. And I'm glad because that started a string of great PS3 exclusives. There's a reason why I'm still mainly main on PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid 4 started that trend of being like, this is the console that has the only games that you really like that are gonna be over here. So, Metal Gear Solid 4,
Man.
I pat you in the back. What a great game.
I remember when Metal Gear Solid 4, once again, another one that gave me a gut punch by the end. I finished the final boss at like 11:30 or something, and I didn't go to bed until like 1:30 or something at least.
Because
it was a full movie that I sat there. I was like, all right, I'll just wait until it's done. And then I'm just sitting here like, I can't go to bed. I can't. This is just too much going on right now. But man, like mine, another one that I could probably go through and list so much nonsense because I bought it really late in its cycle because I almost didn't. And then,
because you got a PS3 late until you experienced it in your church, I remember when you said it.
So that whole story, short version is my youth pastor had his own PS3 that he let us borrow for the church youth group, and one day they were all doing something and I didn't have to, so I was like, hey, I'm gonna hang out in here and maybe play that PS3, and he's like, yeah, go for it. He had Uncharted 2 and 3 there, so I just popped in Uncharted 2 for the fun of it. I was like, I heard this was like Indiana Jones, let's see what that's about. And for anyone knowing, Indiana Jones is like the second under Star Wars for like the best, my favorite thing of all time. And so I just sit there and I get hooked immediately, and I play through almost in one sitting all the way up until the train crashed. So I played through all of that game and just ate it up.
Yeah.
And then
that first half is perfect
like,
of that game. It's
I have to buy this game. And it's funny because right after that is where things kind of falter a little bit. So it's funny that I played just the perfect part of it. And I thought I was near the end of the game because I was like, oh, okay, so that's where the game ends. And
no, it's just halfway through.
All right, let's see what happens. And sure enough, it just keeps going after that. But my goodness, I didn't even buy a PS3 until like maybe a year after that point. But that was my definitive.
So Uncharted 2 is your definitive PS3 experience.
Yes, yeah, it was. But that's pretty much it, because most of my rest of my stuff I stayed with 360 until the PS4 happened.
Yeah, like Uncharted. Let's put it that way. It's like Metal Gear Solid 4 walked for Uncharted 2 to run as like finally giving the PS3 its identity that then it carried through the end of its life cycle, and set up the momentum of them like defining that PlayStation exclusives before they started getting a little samey were like the bastions of quality. So yeah, it's like Metal Gear Solid 4 and Uncharted 2. What a great 2-punch, because one came out in 2008, the other one in 2009. So
yeah, and what great years for gaming those were.
Yeah, ironically, I got a PS3 before a Wii. I would have thought it would have been the other way around. In fact, I got a PS3 because Wiis were just scarce. There was no way to find one. And I finally got a Wii. And this one's easy to say. What is my favorite game on the Wii? Freaking Super Mario Galaxy. But Mario Galaxy was why I wanted that system. Mario games are just events for my family. It was like, even though Sunshine didn't it didn't tickle the nostalgia that 64 did for me and my mom. Like, my mom absolutely hated the music in Sunshine. She just loves the ones from 64, but
really.
But Galaxy was like a return to that Mario 64 kind of grandeur in a bigger scale. Yeah. And to me, it's like the perfect video game of that generation. It was just so... It was probably the only game that justified the Wiimote in a way that wasn't intrusive.
Yeah.
Compared to like Skyward Sword. It was like that decided to really take it fully with the technology that wasn't as reliable. Mario Galaxy was just perfect. Mario Galaxy just only a few flickers, and it just felt like a natural extension for you. It was tailor-made for that Wii system, that even playing it on a full controller on the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, it works, but it's like you might as well play it with like the two Joy-Cons to like re-experience.
Yeah, Joy-Cons now, gosh.
Yes, exactly. The two Joy-Cons to kind of like at least give the closest experience to the majesty that is Galaxy. Is just Nintendo at its creative best, putting the technology to great use in a creative way that is an extension of the player without ever feeling like a distraction. And it's like Nintendo at the peaks of their power in visual and music majesty. And in the Wii, it's very easy to call that the best game.
I think
and my favorite from that system.
That was pretty much also my favorite, but I had another one that was
Mhm.
right there actually next to it because of very specific circumstances, and that was Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn.
Yeah, I never played it, so tell me about it.
So that was the first one I bought on a whim at like Game Trader, GameStop, one of those things, because the anime characters look kind of cool, and I knew it was kind of strategy based, and so I popped that in, and the fact that it was permadeath was like, oh, this is like real. Okay, so let's see how this goes. And sure enough, like the rawness, I mean, I didn't understand the concept of save scumming back then, so you would just redo it and avoid people dying, but it was like, it was hitting me to my core where I was like, okay, so I've got all these really cool, well-designed characters in this cool strategy side of it, and I still think that it's more streamlined than how Three Houses is really kind of convoluted with the school drama, like not even drama, just like dealing with the school side of it before you even jump straight into the actual battles of the game, being like almost an afterthought sometimes. But Radiant Dawn was just all about building this army from like 2 people to hundreds, and I mean, you only fought with like 20 people on the screen at once, but even so, it was just the fact that you had to really think about every single move, every single option, and by the end of it, it would give you this like readout of based on who survived, like what they did after the events of the game. And so it was like hearing that like the best friend of the person that like one of them died was like they mourned and never really got over their lost love, and I was like, oh my gosh, I killed him. And just like how powerful that was for me. And even now looking back, it was like, oh, okay, that's kind of goofy, but gosh, like I binged through that game because my parents went out of town one day and like stayed out for like a whole like a couple of weeks, and I just played it on this huge screen and I was obsessed. So that was like this weirdly specific time where I was just obsessed with something, and there's that, and then probably Super Mario Galaxy would be my next favorite. But yeah, that was it for me for the week.
It's such an for the Wii, it's such easy pickings because the Wii wasn't very good.
It had a lot of crazy cool stuff, but
I'll still appreciate some of their big games. I like Twilight Princess in it. I think I would rather prefer playing it on GameCube and Wii U nowadays, but it works. At least in its gimmicky side, I prefer it than playing Skyward Sword on the Wii, personally, because at least the controllers work even if it's just waggling. Metroid Prime 3 were a game that I recently beat last year. It was like shockingly good game. That I wish I had played more back then when I knew how to play those kind of games. The Mario Kart one, the game there was good, but I prefer Double Dash on GameCube. It gave us Donkey Kong Country Returns also. It gave us a remake of GoldenEye that started there and then made it its way to 360 and PlayStation 3 with Reloaded. And Smash Bros. Brawl, I know it's hated in the Smash community, but that's my favorite Smash Brothers because of the campaign. So, and the best song and the best music to me, especially the Final Destination music of that game is still the epic. And when I play the Switch version, I put that Brawl song because it's epic.
I just realized the only reason why I knew of Fire Emblem in the first place was because of Brawl.
Yeah,
because they put Ike in it.
Exactly.
I knew of it because of Roy and Marth from Melee, but that I didn't really know what that was, and it wasn't until seeing Ike that I was like, this game seems like I want to play it.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like the Wii. To me, the Wii peaked early in its first 2 years, and then with Mario Galaxy and Donkey Kong Country Returns, like in its final 2 years. But then a lot of that Wii was just a wash. But its great games were great.
No More Heroes, that was later on, wasn't it?
In the middle of the life cycle, but I didn't play it.
Okay.
So
I didn't either, but I know those were people swear by it.
Yeah. In the Wii, if you were strictly in the Nintendo phase, you needed to swear by a lot. So
fair point.
So a slight detour to, I don't think you played anything in the PS Vita, Paul?
I played Gravity Rush.
Oh, okay. Is that the only thing you played? Yeah.
That was like one of the only things, so that was, it was a fantastic game because I never saw something that messed with the idea of gravity and flying like that. So that was really cool, and I think I own it on PS4 now.
I have it on PS4 also. The Vita, it will always be Sony's greatest tragedy. It was such a great looking handheld that they just completely mishandled.
Really cool concept.
Yeah, just the idea of console quality on the go. It's like they had the idea of the Switch. The Switch just properly made it, because the thing is that
they put effort into that. They could have jumped on that before Switch was even a thing.
Yeah, the Switch is the realization of a company making that their only focus. The Vita was just a side focus. That's why it failed compared to the system that completely succeeded. But the Vita had a couple great games. The Uncharted game there, it's better than Drake's Fortune, I would say.
Golden
it's more
Compass or something.
Golden Abyss, yeah.
Golden Abyss. Golden Compass is the other thing.
Yes, and the Killzone game Mercenary is actually the best Killzone game of the series.
Wait,
Killzone Mercenaries.
I played a Killzone game on PSP. That was
but that was Liberation.
Awesome.
That was Liberation.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Killzone Mercenary was better because it was like the realization of a handheld shooter, and still one of the few handheld shooters you get, because funny enough, there's a 2-stick device in the Switch and you barely get shooters there because of Nintendo.
Yeah.
But the game that I already associated with the PS Vita though, it's Rayman Origins. Rayman Origins is a game that on PS3 I liked fine, but then on Vita it was like the realization that kind of game works so much better on a handheld. It just automatic, especially a handheld as beautiful as the Vita with its OLED. Like getting to see the art style of Rayman Origins, playing it there and feeling so tight and so at home with the Vita. It gave me the idea that if there was a game that was a platformer that was in many that was available also on PS3, I would play it on Vita. That's how I played the original Guacamelee. That's how I played Sound Shapes. That's how I played many other stuff. The Vita just made that kind of side scroller just the perfect home for it, and then it became the home for indies. As long as the Vita had indies support before it got finally cut off, that's where I would play those games. And
there was always one slot that PlayStation Plus would always give out one free Vita game.
Yeah.
So that was like
two
free Vita games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. But I think that was worth its weight in gold for the life cycle of that thing.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the Vita was always like, its Achilles heel was Sony never budged on the memory card prices. They never budged, and that killed that system. Yeah. So the Vita was the little handhold that could, until it couldn't. But Rayman Origins was like just the idea of like finally realizing the kind of games that, since we were not getting the console quality gaming on the go after Uncharted and Killzone because Sony completely disregarded it, Rayman Origins at least gave me the template of what are the kinds of games that would work perfectly in this system as long as it's supported. And I always thank Origins for that, because shockingly a game that I liked fine in the console, I love there. It's so funny how that works even though they're the same game. So Paul, we're nearing the home stretch now. We're in the generation 7 or 8, the PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch. So unequivocally, the first system of these ones that I got was the PS4, just for my PS3.
3DS.
Frick, I forgot about the 3DS. Sorry about that. Yeah, the 3DS. Yeah, the 3DS also happened there. I barely had anything in it because I was kind of moving on from handhelds at that point. But the 3DS was the system where I finally got the definitive version of what's considered one of the best games of all time, Zelda Ocarina of Time. The 3DS version of that game is amazing. It looks so good with the improved art style compared, like, look at how it looks in 3DS and compared to how the N64 version on Switch looks. Like them cleaning out the polygons, it being on a handheld and working, kind of like giving you a prototype of how a full-on console game could work on the go. And I wanted to give Ocarina of Time its props because that, alongside Wind Waker, are my favorite Zeldas. But I also wanted to give Mario 64 its props. So it's good that I can insert it in the Nintendo 3DS because it's the best version of that game. And also Majora's Mask works really well on 3DS.
True.
It's the best way to play those two games.
I wish that they just made it easier to, like, why couldn't they make it that you could, like, plug your 3DS into a TV and just play it on the TV?
Yeah.
Because I would get motion sickness just from having to, like, hold it in front of me or look down, and all of the movement would mess me up. But gosh, it kind of stunted my ability to enjoy the 3DS most of the time. So to the point that another Fire Emblem game made it, Fire Emblem Awakening.
Yeah, that had the 3 different versions, right?
Yeah, no, that one was still just Fire Emblem Awakening. The one after that split it into 3, where you had to like choose which one. I didn't even buy that because I was dumb. But Fire Emblem Awakening was the first time where they had that you can partner up people that were on your team, and they would like make them closer friends, and eventually that was like people turned it into a dating sim basically. But it was really cool that you could like partner off people that were complementary, and then they would get better at fighting together. It was really cool. And then of course they still had the dangers of dying, but I think they added the option where you could turn it off in that one. That was the first time, and that was really enjoyable. And then also, as an honorable mention, Super Mario Maker, which I did not play on Wii U, and you couldn't create.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. It's the 3DS version is a bad version of the game.
It is, but it was so fun because I didn't have any other like real 2D Mario games at the time. And I love the possibilities of just having like
infinite Mario
that somebody made. So I played that really hard for like a couple of weeks, honestly. But that goes to show how little I really played the 3DS outside of like the usual Pokemons. But I just didn't vibe with those as much. The only one I think I finished was Pokemon Y. So yeah, 3DS was like, it was really cool in concept, and I think I spent more time with the was it Street Pass? What was it called?
Yeah, do Street Pass. It's some weird thing. Yeah,
I did that constantly because I was GameStop employee. So you just sat there, people walked in, you just got free stuff all the time. I loved it. Anyway, that was it for the 3DS.
Exactly, yeah. But now we can move into like the consoles. Obviously, in the PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, early Nintendo Switch generation, the PS4 was like the dominant system you can get there. That generation will always be a fun one, I said before and after, because that was the generation when I started getting disenchanted with games. Also, despite me playing a lot, and I've told that story. I think I've told that story before, that it was like early 2018.
Yeah.
At that point, it was like games were starting to feel a little samey. That's when the services, open worlds were like all over the place. I was like, where was the variety that I remember from in the PS2, Xbox, GameCube era, the PS3, 360 era? Because I feel like I'm still playing.
Was a rough time.
Yeah, I feel like I'm playing better versions of the same game. So I don't know if I'm finally aging out of that, but of course, one game took me out of that funk and has kept me playing now. I'm still playing games gleefully after it. Of course, my favorite game on PS4 is God of War. God of War it's the finest exclusive of that console. It's a masterclass in reimagining completely a series, and it gave me a great perspective on fatherhood, in a way, that made me appreciate a lot of what my dad did to me, playing me as Kratos. That made me respect him more, and it's crazy that a God of War game a series so known for its intensity, its violence, its its depravity, could mature that way and working, because some games that rework themselves sometimes don't work. They lose what makes them great. And obviously the scale of the game maybe was pared back a little compared to what came before, but it was all in service of like the more intimate, up your close nature of the game that gave me an open world that wasn't really an open world, was more like a Zelda, like that just kept expanding. A more depth in its combat for a game that was similar to Naughty Dog kinds of story-based games. It was like it's the game that told me that if you have like a linear story-based game, there's no excuse if your gameplay it's not up to snuff, because God of War had more depth than it intends. Sometimes a little too much depth in its systems and all that. I've tried to go back to it earlier this year, and I'm now starting noticing some of the things that it doesn't do well, that I can see now Ragnarok being the thing that improves upon, because that game didn't nail some little things but got so many of the things that it meant. But I will always thank that game for being the thing that has kept me gaming, because I was that close to being like, yeah, I think I'm aging out of this, but no, I'm not, and I'm stronger than ever. I'm beating Elden Ring.
Right?
So
gosh,
yeah, God of War, easy pick for that console.
Mine, once again, is pretty easy, even though it is such a hard generation to go through and narrow down to that point. And it's obviously Uncharted 4 for me.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few others, and I think certain things like Red Dead Redemption 2 had aged a little better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the single player fantastic still, but just, in the
Online's a disaster there.
Online's a disaster. The lack of support for it at all. The problems with my weird ghost popping in here and there again.
Yeah.
No, but still doing it.
Yeah.
All right. Just the stuff that you could do with the PS4 was just amazing. But anyway, Uncharted 4 capping off such an awesome saga that was from the beginning. I think what I was always looking for with Indiana Jones that they never got. They kind of tried to do that, and then they pulled their punch at the last minute for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, along with doing a lot of really dumb things. But this was like that, just, all right, we're going to tell one last story. We're going to go freaking nuts with it. And even despite all of its troubled development and struggles limiting the amount of places you could kind of visit, just the superhuman story of a guy that got everything he wanted and then realized he needed, or thought he needed more, so he nearly throws all of it away for one last hurrah that used to be glorified back in the day, and now is like, dude, what are you doing? You have way more to live for. And just the realization, that human element really resonated with me, where it's like, your purpose is not your life or your career, and your purpose is far more the stuff that you need to do with the people around you.
The story of Uncharted 4 is amazing. I always say, like, I have been very vocal that as just a single game to pop on, I don't vibe as much with it, and something that I reaffirm myself with the PS5 version. But the story, especially as an end cap, another end cap, like being an end cap to a series that I had been following for a while, kind of like Metal Gear was at a time, and it being so brave for, and at the peak of its popularity, they were like, we're ending Uncharted here, and doing it in such a way that it just hits, especially if you had just recently experienced the trilogy and getting to play that game. The story of that game's immaculate. It really is.
So I know it's got its shortcomings that we've already talked about, but just the way that it played out with a lot of my favorite tropes of different things is just, it's untouched for PS4.
Yeah. And then the Xbox One, the much maligned Xbox One. Unfortunately, a console very defined by the exclusives it didn't have later in its life cycle, because they emptied the barrel early on because they needed to do something to beat the PS4. Obviously, I think of the Xbox One generation as a rebuilding generation for Xbox, where I appreciate the initiatives they've done and how that system has allowed me to re-experience the 360 days in such an easy and enhanced way, even though I'm experiencing them in the worst way, because the newer consoles of the Xbox give you even better enhancements to your old games. But that initiative started there. However, one game from the Xbox One generation early on that got ported later to the Switch, that's still, like, to me, like, getting to experience that coming from Xbox. I was like, this is so unlike them. I'm so glad they invested in this. Ori and the Blind Forest. Ori and the Blind Forest is my favorite Metroidvania game of all time in that style. It is a game of such immeasurable beauty, where every single screenshot that you look of that game is like a freaking art piece. It is it's a tough platformer, but it merits its tough platforming into a story of survival and you desiring to win back the things you've lost. Because the beginning of that game is as sad as the beginning of Up and The Last of Us.
I remember the trailer kind of like gave you that setup for
it's a very melancholic experience that then maintains this mystical feeling, that Shadow of the Colossus style mystical feeling in its platforming and its otherworldly and the otherworldliness of its normal looking parts, because it's going through jungles and all that, but the way it's lit, the way it's scored, the music score is probably my favorite musical score from any game of that generation. And it was just such a tight game that I beat it many times, and I beat the normal version on Xbox One, the definitive edition they released a year later. I beat it on Switch also when I had it in handheld mode. That game just really speaks to me. Its sequel is a better video game, but lost a lot of the mystique by adding NPCs, more characters into the world. There was just something so mystical about it, and of that original game that makes this mysticism with the pathos, and I'll never forget it. That's still the definitive Xbox One game for me, even if it's not only an Xbox One game, it's still the game I associated more with that console.
For me, I actually had a couple of options here that I wasn't 100% sold on. And I think I'm switching it at the very end, because originally it was going to be Forza Horizon 2, because I really loved the way they built out the scope for that series. Then it was going to be Gears 4. So I was like, it's not the best, but it was another game that I experienced there.
And you can give a Gears 4 like it managed to do what Force Awakens did, was showing people that despite the original people not working on it, the new people could make something that looks exactly the same.
And then I threw all of that out for Sunset Overdrive.
Yeah, Sunset Overdrive is like it was my second pick. Sunset Overdrive is like without that we don't get Spider-Man, because it gave Insomniac the tools to make an open world game to nail traversal. All that traversal mechanics got put on and improved on Spider-Man. And such also weird game to come from Xbox, as a system so known for its shooters, for its Halos, its Alien stuff. All that kind of tropiness that, as you associate the Xbox brand, that's still such an off-ball thing. And when eventually Sunset Overdrive makes it to PlayStation, if there's some exclusivity that they eventually lose, is like at the very least in the Xbox side, they don't have a more unique AAA game.
Yeah.
Because Ori's an indie.
Yeah, and gosh, I remember picking it up on a whim. Because I didn't I saw the release trailer or reveal trailer for it, and just the tongue-in-cheek attitude about it, where it starts off as like a military shooter for a second, and then he's hiding there and he's like, cover-based shooter. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
It was it knew how to poke fun at tropes.
It stayed so fun with like that concept that I was starting to get tired of with the whole zombie apocalypse thing, but they put such a fresh spin on it, even to the point where I think one of the DLC bosses was literally the developer of the game on video screens cursing you out while you tried to shoot at him, and it was just such a weird meta way that I adored at that time, and I don't know how well it's gonna be like.
It still holds
aging?
up. It still holds up well. I beat it. I finished it again 2 years ago, so it's like it still holds up mechanically. It still holds up and it's fun. It's the Jet Set. It's a modern Jet Set Radio game.
It really does feel like that, and I don't even think I have the disc for it anymore, so I would just have to hope that it's
on Game Pass.
To it. I don't want Game Pass anymore, man.
Yeah.
I don't.
But that's the thing. If you wanna like re-experience it, if it's still stuck on Xbox, just pay it.
If I ever do, I might have to. But yeah. So that is definitely it for me on Xbox now.
Yes.
I'm sure we have our last one.
Yeah, it's the PS5. This one's an interesting one because obviously.
We just
crap, I forgot. Yeah.
So technically,
yes, the Switch. Yeah, both the Switch and the PS5 are basically ongoing right now, and then Nintendo Switch is obviously Nintendo's coup de grace right now that they are enjoying such success, and I will still say in the Nintendo Switch, the best game.
It's a no-brainer.
And my favorite is the first game. Breath of the Wild.
Yep.
I've said many times in our show, I don't think I like Zelda Breath of the Wild as a Zelda game as much as I do something like Ocarina of Time or Wind Waker as more of a traditional Zelda experience. However, as a breakdown of the Zelda experience and as an evolution of open worlds that then gave us something like Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild is unmatched. The video you shared a couple days ago of someone doing this weird ass anime attack with the Master Sword. It's like, how much depth can a game have that we are 5 years removed and people are still finding ways the developer baked into the game to interact with it? That game is an endless pit of creativity, and just what a great and just a masterclass in physics manipulation. And it doesn't break. It's incredibly polished.
It all breaks in just the right ways all the time, and it's Uh, I remember when I wasn't going to buy that game or the Switch, and then they made the trailer, and I was like, well, I guess I'm buying it.
Yeah.
And then when I just slowly opened up the world more and more, and I was just enamored with every part of it. And even now, like, some of little parts of it didn't age the best, like the lack of dungeons, the breakable weapons, or not even the breakable weapons, but how quick they are to break.
Yeah, it's so fragile. There's not weapon,
Yeah.
there's weapon fragility in that game.
Yeah, but and then like just the idea of like you've already lost, and now you have to get back to where you were is like, okay, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Let's see what this is
And then
about.
piecing the story together. That's the thing. Like, it doesn't have a great narrative, but it has great narrative snippets that you can find, all in service of the open world gameplay. And it's a game of such. It's so well thought out. Especially think about it. It's Nintendo's first ever open world game. 2 generations after like the other ones have tried their open worlds, and it's just crazy that it's obviously whenever the sequel happens, it's gonna be a big event. It will be interesting to experience it in a post Elden Ring world, because Elden Ring is just such a like it's the evolution of that idea, and without weapon fragility. Even think about it that way.
Yeah, gosh.
Yeah, that's the thing. Not my favorite Zelda. What an incredible game. That's both statements can be true of that, and it's still the definitive Switch experience for like hardcore. I mean, it's like there's nothing better there. I like Odyssey. I like Metroid Dread personally, but Breath of the Wild is the game for the Switch. Yeah.
But yeah, and then
the
our
PS5
last thing, the PS5, because I don't think Xbox One X really has
the Series X. Yeah, doesn't. Yeah, so not that I have experience, and I don't have the Series either Series S or X. So none of those games like really speak to me right now. So like putting it a favorite.
Microsoft needs to come out with exclusives for us to be able to put that on our list.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Halo Infinite, but even though I experienced it on PC, I put something else I like on PC better. Even though, yeah, it's different. It's potato. That's a 2002 game versus a 2021 game. But the PS5, obviously, our current console of choice at the moment, because I really want to get the series consoles, because whenever their future gets here, with all they've acquired, they might have something there that really speaks to me. But right now, as for the PS5, we've had a fairly strong start to like games that define that console. But to me, I feel like I would be remiss if I don't talk about this game, because I feel it was until I played it here that it really made a bigger impression on me than before. Spider-Man Remastered. Because I knew
I wasn't gonna count it as a PS5 game.
Spider-Man Remastered is a PS5 game.
You dethroned whatever I was gonna have.
Yeah,
really.
It's like it's such a Spider-Man Remaster is like such a great way to enhance one of the PS4's best games. A game that got technically undershadowed by releasing next to God of War and Red Dead Redemption 2 back in 2018, but getting to see all the improvements they brought to Miles Morales, and getting to experience that in the PS5 package, where it's just that's the comfort food game on PS5. That's not a live service game. It's like the game is just, it has just made one of the PS4's best games even better, and not having to worry about platinuming the game like I did back in the PS4 version, getting to experience it there, getting to experience the best Peter Parker story of all time, still to this day, and it being enhanced by the better animation, it being enhanced by the better bells and whistles of the PS5 version. How immensely fun that combat is! It's that game. I played a lot of Spider-Man Remastered when I finally got my PS5, and I still like think so highly of it, because it made me finally crack that game into one of my favorite games of all time that we'll have in a future evergreen episode. That is like the Marvel Spider-Man 2018 is the greatest superhero game ever made. It overtook the Arkham games for me. It's still a gold benchmark, and technically, Miles Morales is an even better game than Remastered. But Remastered is but that 2018 game was the complete package, and Spider-Man 2 is my most anticipated game on the PS5 right now, even more than God of War Ragnarok, because Ragnarok I have my apprehensions because of how much that original game means to me, and we're getting it next year. So Spider-Man Remaster is my PS5 like favorite game there.
It was going to be Elden Ring for me just because that's like the most definitive experience on the PS5 I've had at this point. And then when you brought that up,
game.
Yeah, because at first it was going to be just barely underneath Uncharted 4 on the PS4 side of it, but since that's technically a PS5 game, that is going to unfortunately dethrone Miles Morales from that spot because oh gosh, Spider-Man Remastered is fantastic. So I can't say anything that you haven't already said. So for the sake of brevity, I'll keep it as short as I can, just giving us the best Peter Parker story, like you said. Fantastic mechanics, the best way to swing through the city, like 20-30 different outfits for free that you
and
can
they
unlock.
Still give us more. They just added
keep giving us more.
They just added the final Spider-Man suit from No Way Home, like that, where he's like running around. They added it.
Oh my gosh, did they really? Because I know they had the gold one. They had the one that was Inside Out, and
the black one also. The black one he uses to fight
right.
Electro and Sandman.
That's the Inside Out one, I think. But golly, like the fact that they just keep throwing us stuff. They gave us the Sam Raimi outfit, the Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, but that was the Amazing Spider-Man outfit is the one that they added with this thing. The Sam Raimi outfit was in the PS4 version.
That's true. Okay, I was just saying in general across the whole game, the fact that they just keep giving us these games pieces for free like that. The DLC was really great. Just every part of it. I would say that the new Spider-Man's face it grew on me.
Yeah, it grew on me too.
At first I kept seeing the previous face and I was like, man, that's just such a good emotion. And at first it didn't look right, but by the end of it he was like emoting exactly the way that I would expect, and now he's...
And that's the thing, like the new face looked worse in gameplay, it looked better on cutscenes.
Yeah. That's pretty much how I'd probably agree with it as well, because the cutscenes, Peter Parker did very much look like he was in his late 20s. This one he looks like he's more in his early 20s, but he also kind of looks more like Peter Parker. So I'm not going to sweat details over it. It would be kind of nice if we could just switch it from one to the other, but gosh, what a fantastic game. And that's in this world where I can barely finish some games. I've played through that one at least 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, it's just such a great game. Like that original Spider-Man is such a great game. Just all the Spider-Man games that Insomniac has made. It's the secret coup de grace of the PlayStation side. I mean, when it comes to exclusives, you can't touch Spider-Man. No one else can touch Spider-Man. So, and with that, Paul, as of right now, that's the end of our episode. And the end of all the favorites that define our console. Whenever we do another episode, when you're on vacation, we're going to talk about our favorite games of all time. So, Paul, where can people find you?
As always, y'all can find me at Dork of Art on Twitter. That's where I post all my memes, all my art, and all the things in between. Where can they find you?
They can find me at @A_Dorsegovia on Twitter, at Alejandro Segovia 93 on Instagram, and at thecriticalcorner.com. My website.
Gosh.
Paul, it's been a pleasure. I hope you had enjoyed your vacation in your usual vacation spot. Stay safe. I want you back. And everyone, thank you always for listening and watching. If you like something, let us know in the comments below. Paul, it's been a pleasure. I'll hopefully see you online. And everyone, remember,
Sex
to play.
Good night, everyone.
Hasta luego.